Georgia reservists putting their affairs in order on the night beat.
Some of you still don't believe Sears Pest Control works for a whole year, especially here in the South. But it does, because we know how bugs think, what materials to use, and where to apply them. In mulch areas to stop palmetto bugs before they get in, around the eaves to eliminate spiders, and inside walls to get roaches, ants, and silverfish where they hide. In fact, our treatment works so well that if the bugs come back during the year, we'll retreat your home for free. So give us a call. No more smelly sprays, monthly visits, or bugs for a whole year. You can believe it, because it's Sears.
Hello, I'm Young MC with a story to tell. I just got a free cup from Taco Bell. NMTV makes the whole thing fun. Buy a giant-sized Pepsi and you'll get one. 4 cups in all, so don't stand still. And if you have an empty cup, you get a free refill. Go to Taco Bell and you see it's true. They got these 4 cups there just for you. Taco Bell only has them for a limited time. That's why I'm coming to you with a limited rhyme. To get these cups, you gotta place your order. So take my advice, you better run for the border.
Seaweed, sprouts, bean curd. Natural foods may be good for you, but a lot of them take some getting used to. If you want to eat something natural, do what I do. Eat my chicken. Purdue chicken has a delicious flavor you don't have to get used to. And there's never anything unnatural in it. I feel better already.
We at Hardee's believe if you see our new Roy Rogers recipe fresh fried chicken with its delicate blend of herbs and spices for at least 27 seconds, you'll be more likely to try it. Our ad agency didn't want to show chicken at all. Here's what they proposed. We're still not sure what this has to do with our Roy Rogers recipe fresh fried chicken, but they said you'd understand.
The man who once ordered Iraqi women and children gassed told some of the foreigners being held against their will that if Iraq were attacked by foreigners, then foreigners, including women and children, would die alongside Iraqis. Only a few hours later, Iraqi television, in Hussein's name, said that all of the several thousand women and children currently his prisoners would be allowed to leave the country. Certainly the U.S. government would like to have a clearer picture of what is going on. We begin in Baghdad with ABC's Forrest Sawyer.
In this latest page from his television campaign book, Saddam told his captive audience he would welcome a TV debate with President Bush and British Prime Minister Thatcher.
Sayyid Bush with Sayyid Thatcher.
I'm prepared now, ready and prepared for direct talks and dialogue with Mr. Bush and with Mrs. Thatcher.
And from one man, a critical question.
Perhaps the gesture of sincerity be the release of some of our women and children.
بعد التقاء السيد الرئيس القائد صدام حسين.
Only a short time later, Iraqi television announced all Western women and children in Iraq would be permitted to leave the country, possibly as soon as tomorrow. It is not clear if this would apply to Westerners in Kuwait. The apparent good news was countered by another, more ominous sign. 6 missing Americans inside Iraq, 2 of them from Baghdad. U.S. officials say that for the first time, Iraqi authorities may be taking hostages outside of Kuwait. At least some of the missing Americans were summoned to government offices just before they disappeared. 2 others were picked up by Iraqi security and released. One of those released says he was told that, for his own safety, he should report to a Baghdad hotel used as a holding pen for Westerners. U.S. officials have filed a vigorous protest, and at least 1 more American has sought refuge with the U.S. Embassy. Another flashpoint. In Basra, the death of an American hostage held captive at a potential military target. Iraqi officials say the man in his 50s died of a heart attack and say they will let an independent Western doctor determine that for himself.
Westerners in Baghdad would view the release of women and children as a very positive sign. But with a possible roundup of Americans beginning here, Saddam's signals are mixed at best. Forrest Sawyer, ABC News, Baghdad.
Forrest reports that the American charge d'affaires in Baghdad spent much of the day trying to verify that foreign women and children will be free to leave Iraq tomorrow. As ABC's John McCarthy reports from the State Department in Washington, there's been no official Iraqi government word to the U.S. government that they can go.
The
State Department officials say they hope the reports that Saddam Hussein will release women and children are true, but there is great skepticism because so much of what Iraq has promised over the last few weeks has turned out not to be true. Of the 3,000 Americans still in Iraq and Kuwait, about half are believed to be women and children. As for Saddam Hussein's earlier suggestion that he engage in a television debate with President Bush and British Prime Minister Thatcher, spokesperson Margaret Tutwiler did not mince words.
It's sick, and it doesn't even deserve a response. Unanimously, the world is condemning what Saddam Hussein had done, with almost an exception to a country. So what is there to debate?
President Bush has said he will talk to Saddam Hussein, but only if the Iraqi leader takes steps towards meeting the demands of the 5 UN Security Council resolutions, one of which is to allow all foreigners, not just women and children, to leave Iraq and Kuwait. As for Iraq's admission that an American hostage has died, officials say they are suspicious of the circumstances surrounding that death. The man was not on the list of 15 Americans that were known to have special medical problems. There was another strange twist today. The Iraqis responded to the expulsion of some of their diplomats in Washington by threatening to throw out some American diplomats in Baghdad and Kuwait. For days, Iraq has prevented American diplomats from leaving, so this is one threat U.S. officials hope Iraq will carry out. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
47 Americans, the dependents of U.S. diplomats in Kuwait, arrived in Washington this afternoon. The ambassador in Kuwait, Nathaniel Howell, is still at his post, and supplies there are said to be running low. One of those who arrived in Washington today was Marina Howell. Her husband is the consular officer in the Kuwait embassy.
Our hearts are left in Kuwait and Baghdad with all our husbands, members of our family, our private American citizens, and members of the international community left behind.
The Japanese left their embassy in Kuwait today. They had a 6-month supply of food in the freezer. But when the Iraqis turned off the electricity, it went bad. President Bush, who has been in touch throughout the crisis with congressional leaders by telephone, flew back to Washington today to brief more than 100 members of Congress in person. Here's ABC's Brett Hume.
The August congressional recess has allowed President Bush to manage this crisis with barely a peep from Capitol Hill. But with the recess nearly over, Mr. Bush summoned the leaders of the relevant committees back to Washington for a briefing intended to make sure they felt included.
Our intention, and indeed the intention of almost every country in the world, is to persuade Iraq to withdraw.
There was no suggestion the U.S. would initiate fighting to pursue that goal or the other U.S. objective of protecting the world's most productive oil fields.
U.S. military forces stand shoulder to shoulder with forces of many Arab and European states to deter, and if need be, defend Saudi Arabia against attack.
The meeting was then closed for a question and answer session during which Mr. Bush assured the members that the embargo was holding and that Saudi Arabia and other countries were making up the lost oil production from Iraq and Kuwait. Afterward, as members seized the opportunity to get their views on television, the Democratic leaders of the House and Senate backed the president in words that could not have been much stronger if the White House had scripted them.
The president had, I would say, strong across-the-board support.
The one clear message that comes from today's meeting is that the United States Congress, and I believe the American people, are united in support of the president's actions.
Still, some members did leave themselves an escape route if things go badly by worrying about the cost and saying there should be more help from Western and Arab countries. And there were the familiar cries from oil state members that the U.S. is too dependent on cheap foreign oil. Britt Hume, ABC News, the White House.
More on the Gulf crisis in just a moment.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by Scope.
A kiss? Oh, not right now.
You really don't want to kiss me?
Dangerous. Very dangerous.
Give me a minute, honey.
Don't let morning breath ruin a good morning. Get Scope. Scope has 2 powerful ingredients to kill 90% of the bacteria that cause morning breath.
Didn't I hear something about a kiss?
Right here. Right now.
Kiss me. It is time for a kiss.
Scope, the best thing first thing in the morning.
Hey, you. Put that kiss right here.
Years ago when I was a waiter, I had awful backaches. My doctor recommended the pain reliever and prescription Motrin. Today, he recommends Motrin IB for pain.
Motrin IB. No prescription needed.
Now it's my place, and my splitting headaches. And Motrin IB has the strength I need.
1 Motrin IB is as effective as 2 regular aspirin.
My headaches just stop. And it's much gentler on my stomach.
Motrin IB. Doctor-recommended pain relief.
In Saudi Arabia today, an event which military commanders have been waiting for eagerly. A substantial amount of military hardware has arrived by sea, including the country's most modern tanks, the M1s. As ABC's Bob Zelnick reports, their arrival makes a big change in the military situation on the ground.
The M1 tanks arrived in Saudi Arabia by ship today after 2 weeks at sea, along with Bradley troop carriers and heavy artillery. Pentagon sources say that 300 to 500 M1s will be sent to the area in the next few weeks.
I feel really sorry for them Iraqis if it comes down to it, because we got them outgunned 40 miles an hour across country. They don't stand a chance.
Experts agree the M1 can defeat the best Soviet-made Iraqi tanks. Its laser-guided weapons are far more accurate. Its 120-millimeter cannon can pierce Iraqi armor, and it can fight well at night. The M1s make it extremely unlikely that an Iraqi attack against Saudi Arabia could succeed, and the tanks do even more.
This tank will increase our offensive capability quite substantially in this region of the world.
The heavy armor, combined with other forces now heading to the region, also gives the U.S. the capability to retake Kuwait by force. Pentagon sources say that a Marine amphibious group will soon be in position for a possible attack by sea, while M1 tank units push up from the south. Perhaps in response to the U.S. buildup, Pentagon officials say Iraq has increased its forces in the area by 65,000. But they're now positioned in a way that's less threatening to Saudi Arabia and better suited to a defense of Kuwait. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
The Pentagon has doubled its estimate of how much it is costing to send all that manpower and material to the Gulf, at least $2.5 billion by the end of September. That figure, by the way, is only for the actual military costs, including getting all those reserve troops into uniform and into position. The total cost to civilian economies all around the world is going to be infinitely higher. We begin in the wheat fields of Colorado. Here's ABC's Tom Foreman.
It's planting time in the wheat fields around Akron, Colorado. And for farmers like Alan Fouts, the timing could not be worse. The embargo against Iraq is cutting off a vital market for his grain.
I'm worried about it, and I think everybody else is worried about it. Worried about the price and what effect it has on me and from being able to operate next year.
Iraq is the second largest buyer in the world of Colorado wheat. But add a worldwide oversupply, which has already forced wheat prices down nearly 40% since last year, and it could spell disaster.
It's a very uncertain time as far as trying to plan what you're going to do for next year.
Fuel costs are up, just as farmers need the most gas to work their fields. In addition, many fertilizers are petroleum-based, so they are more expensive too.
And it costs $95 a day more to run my tractor today than what it did in harvest time, July.
The sands of Iraq are a long way from the plains of Colorado. The fact that the troubles there are being felt and feared here are a measure of just how pervasive those troubles have become. Akron is a small town, small enough that people still go to the state fair, still say the economic threat facing them is minor compared to a threat against their country.
In a situation like we have, we all have to do something, and this may be my part of it. This may be what I can do.
Of course, a sheaf of wheat is supposed to be a thing of beauty.
But wheat farmers are also smart businessmen who know if the situation goes on, fewer of them will be in the business next time planting season rolls around. Tom Foreman, ABC News, Akron, Colorado.
President Bush told members of Congress today that if the economic embargo is maintained, Iraq will pay a price for its behavior. It is a dicey question keeping any economic embargo going. Some countries hurt more than others. For example, Sri Lanka stands to lose $100 million of trade a year selling tea to the Iraqis. The defense minister in Sri Lanka said sanctions can be imposed by the rich countries. Some of us cannot afford to stop selling our products.
Developing countries will be hardest hit by the sanctions. How long they can hold out will depend on alternative financing that they can receive, and also the ability to restructure their economy somewhat further.
The Republic of Ireland stands to lose $75 million in the beef trade, and the Iraqis already owe them $100 million for beef they have shipped. No trade, no payment. The overall cost to American wheat and rice farmers is hard to come by. In Australia, joining the embargo may cost $1 billion this year in wheat sales alone. Australians are not going to make to Iraq. And what about those less developed countries which have relied on Iraqi and Kuwaiti oil? The Philippines got 23% of its oil from Kuwait, Pakistan 70%. India took 40% of its oil from Kuwait and Iraq and has only 35 days of supply on hand.
A good deal of that shortfall should be made up by additional production from those countries, from Saudi Arabia and Venezuela.
You have seen the scenes of workers fleeing Iraq and Kuwait, hundreds of thousands of Egyptians, Pakistanis, Filipinos, guest workers from Bangladesh, who now have no jobs in Iraq and Kuwait and thus no longer send money home. The Egyptian economy alone will be missing more than $1 billion this year, sent back from Egyptians working in the Gulf. The question is, will nations with the most to lose decide that the price of sanctions is too high? Short of war, will the international effort to rein in Saddam Hussein unravel? Shipping sources in the Gulf say that U.S. warships prevented a Chinese cargo vessel from docking in the Jordanian port of Aqaba today. At least some of the cargo was bound for Iraq. No word on what it was. Dissension in the OPEC ranks today. At the OPEC oil ministers' talks in Vienna, the Iranian delegation walked out. The other 10 nations there appear willing to let any member that has the ability to pump out more oil pump it out to make up for the 4 million barrels a day lost from Iraq and Kuwait. But Iran, which doesn't have that extra pumping capacity, is against it. We'll be back in just a moment.
Energy. It comes from a balanced diet that contains B vitamins. B vitamins help turn food into energy. To be sure you're getting enough, take Theragran M. It's packed with 50% more of each B vitamin than other leading brands. Theragran M high-potency multivitamins with minerals from Squibb helps unleash your energy.
I'd like to place an order.
We interrupt this order.
On page 61.
For something else that delivers.
Oh, they'll like that.
The card that actually pays you cash back for every charge.
It's a gift.
The Discover card.
What'd you do for lunch? Just a little shopping.
It pays to Discover, the card that pays you back.
Hey, look. Gluten spread satin's on sale. This would be a good time to paint the living room. While you're at it, you could do the kitchen and the downstairs bathroom.
What about the dining room?
The dining room.
I was kidding.
Uncle Charlie hasn't thought about his dentures all day, because he thought about Orifix this morning.
Orifix 'em. That'll fix 'em.
Orifix has extra hold to hold dentures tight day and night. Orifix 'em. That'll fix 'em.
The Iraqi government has taken another step to emphasize its historic claim on Kuwait. The government has redesigned its maps, making Kuwait the 19th province of Iraq and renaming the capital Kadima, which was apparently the city's name before World War I. It is not the kind of news to hearten Kuwaitis who fled to Saudi Arabia, which is where ABC's Bill Redeker is tonight.
Nearly 1 month after the invasion, there are more than 100,000 Kuwaitis here, asking for help. Millionaires and middle class, all with one thing in common: for the moment, they have no home.
Everything with us behind. We couldn't take anything with us. We just take whatever it is in our pockets, and that's it.
The Saudis welcomed the Kuwaitis, first providing sanctuary for the Emir of Kuwait. For the thousands of others who fled, the kingdom is providing deluxe hotel accommodations, opening its restaurants and hospitals, taking care of the children, all of it completely free.
It was the decent thing to do. It was the humanitarian thing to do. And I don't think you will find one person in Saudi Arabia who will question our support or our welcome for our Kuwaiti brothers.
Equally valuable, the Saudis have given the Kuwaitis daily access to television and radio broadcasts. The Kuwaitis use the time to transmit amateur video scenes of their resistance back home, scenes meant to rally support throughout the Gulf. No one will say how much all of this is costing Saudi Arabia, but no one really seems to care. The government says the commitment is open-ended for as long as Kuwaitis are homeless. While the men bravely talk about the impossible, fighting the Iraqis in Kuwait, the women are just as angry.
I still like to kill all Iraqis one by one, you know. I'm so angry.
Among refugees here, that sort of anger is growing, along with the realization that there is little they can do but wait. Bill Rediker, ABC News, Saudi Arabia.
Not all Kuwaitis are obliged to sit it out in Saudi Arabia waiting for someone else to decide what will happen to them. For when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait, they did not, for the most part, get their hands on the country's financial fortune. ABC's Jim Bitterman tonight on Kuwait Incorporated in exile.
At London's Old English Gentleman Pub, Kuwaitis, who've been stranded by the Iraqi invasion, gather each morning for coffee and collective worry about their homeland and what's to become of them. But if they could see behind the highly secure doors of the Kuwaiti investment office not far away, they might feel better about their financial future. For years, the Kuwait government has invested a part of its oil income, mainly through this office in London, against the day when the oil fields would run dry. Now, the Iraqis may have grabbed the oil fields, but they can't touch Kuwait's $100 billion portfolio of foreign investments that reside here. Investments which earn Kuwaitis more each year than the oil ever did. Those holdings include stakes in prestigious properties like English hotels, German industrial companies, and American department stores. Western governments, which had frozen Kuwait's assets to keep them out of Iraqi hands, have begun relaxing controls.
We have full control, and the amount of cooperation that we've gotten from Treasury departments and central banks all over the world is tremendous.
Kuwait also holds gold valued at $900 million, safely stored outside the country. In the London trading rooms of some Kuwaiti banks, business goes on just as before the Iraqi invasion. And even Kuwait's 6,000 European service stations remain open, thanks primarily to crude oil purchased from Saudi Arabia. With 1 out of every 6 Kuwaitis now living outside the country, the government is using income from its investments to give cash to those in need. So while Kuwaiti exiles have lost their homeland, they are not without resources. Jim Bitterman, ABC News, London.
We'll have some of the day's other news in just a moment.
In the silent dawn, a golden sun, soft kiss, warm smile, the day's begun, the touch, the feel, the fabric of our lives, the touch, the feel of cotton, the fabric of our lives.
Did you know your small business should have AT&T long distance?
You hear that?
Oh, why? With MCI, we're getting big savings.
But you could get AT&T quality.
You hear that?
We're getting big savings.
But AT&T prices are extremely competitive.
You hear that?
Now, we're getting big savings.
Well, for that call from Chicago to Detroit, your big savings is pennies.
That's it?
There's your big savings.
Competitive price. Another AT&T advantage.
I was eating a cheeseburger when I saw I had a runaway car. It was a Maalox moment. Thank heaven Maalox Plus is so strong.
Easy, boys. She's purring like a kitten.
Maalox Plus, strong relief for all your Maalox moments.
Switch to oat bran? No way. Post bran flakes gives me 2/3 more fiber than the leading oat bran flake, and that keeps the brass in this horn
Post natural bran flakes, keeping you at your best.
2/3 more fiber.
Everybody needs some money sometime. Everybody needs some cash somehow.
Hello, dear. To send money fast, by phone, call 1-800-CALL-CASH or come to any of Western Union's 16,000 convenient locations.
My sometime is now.
Western Union, the fastest way to send money.
In other news tonight, one of those most pressing of all issues before Americans that has been eclipsed, at least in the news, by the crisis in the Gulf, and only made worse by what the Gulf crisis is costing, the budget. All this week, federal workers around the country are finding out firsthand what will happen to them if Congress and the President cannot agree on a new spending plan that substantially reduces the federal deficit. ABC's Bettina Gregory is in Washington.
The letters are going out to nearly 2.5 million federal employees. They say workers will be furloughed, laid off without pay for up to 2 days a week starting October 1st unless Congress passes a new federal budget. Without that budget, paychecks could be 40% lower.
That won't even pay my rent for the month. And that's not even counting food, you know, or the other necessities that I might need.
The tough thing is I think they're putting it on the back of the federal employees. And though we work for the government, it's not our deficit, it's all our deficits.
If the reduced work week goes into effect, government services will be cut back. The FBI says criminal investigations will be affected. So will policing of illegal drugs and prosecuting S&L fraud. Government benefit checks, such as Social Security, could be late, and it may be more dangerous to fly.
It's going to be more airplanes being worked by less controllers. Impact is going to be devastating.
John Sturdivant represents 700,000 federal workers.
No company, no corporation that's successful can run this way, and it's just a disgrace that the so-called leaders of our country have gotten us in this financial mess.
Agencies such as the Department of Housing and Urban Development say instead of staggered layoffs, they may close down completely for at least 3 weeks before the end of the year. Bettina Gregory, ABC News, Washington.
On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrials gained just over 3 points to close at 26.14. The trading was very slow. In northern Illinois this afternoon, 5 people were killed when a tornado touched down in the town of Crest Hill. It tore through an apartment complex, destroyed dozens of homes, and tore the roof off a local high school. At the University of Florida in Gainesville today, there is widespread concern that a serial killer is on the loose. This morning, the bodies of a man and woman were found at a student apartment building. Since Sunday, 3 young women, all students, have been found dead near the university. There was a major upset at the U.S. Open tennis tournament in New York today. The #1 player in the world, Stefan Edberg of Sweden, was beaten in the very first round by Alexander Volkov of the Soviet Union. Volkov was ranked 52nd in the world. Back in a moment.
Every year, drivers are presented the usual assortment of compact cars. But by using Kansei engineering, Mazda has designed a compact car that doesn't feel like one, the Mazda Protege.
Squeeze in there.
So while we may have created a new kind of car, it seems we also created a new kind of driver. The compact car enthusiast.
Oh, it just feels right. Come on. It'll be fine.
Quaker Oats has a lot of stuff that's good for you, like complex carbohydrates. But that's only half the story. See, it hasn't got a lot of stuff that's bad for you, like a lot of fat. Quaker Oats, it's the right thing to do.
Started slowly. Before I knew it, the damage was done.
To prevent water damage, millions trust their homes to Thompson's Water Seal. Its unique formula penetrates wood, concrete, and brick to lock water out like nothing else. It's the #1 seller, Thompson's Water Seal.
If your American Express traveler's checks are lost or stolen, just phone and your refund can be delivered virtually anywhere.
Is that you, hon?
Take only American Express traveler's checks. Don't leave home without them.
Love the vegetables. Hate the gas.
The healthier you eat, the more you may need Gas-X for the fastest gas pain relief antacids can't give you.
So eat right and feel right with Gas-X.
Tonight on Nightline, television in the Persian Gulf crisis. Who's best at using the media, George Bush or Saddam Hussein? And the debate over network news coverage. Tonight.
Just before we leave again this evening, the latest from the Persian Gulf. Iraqi television said tonight that Saddam Hussein will release foreign women and children tomorrow. The State Department says it hopes that is true. Earlier, Hussein appeared on television with some of the Western hostages. He said if Iraq is attacked by foreigners, then foreigners will die, including women and children, alongside Iraqis. Also today, the State Department said that 6 Americans have disappeared inside Iraq and 3 inside Kuwait. That is our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. We'll keep you up to date. See you tomorrow. Good night.
A presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.